Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at workplace dynamics,
Okay.
but with kind of a fun twist.
Sounds good.
So we're actually going to be dissecting a dialogue from an English language learning podcast,
Oh,
of all things.
interesting.
And it's amazing what we can learn about office culture and budgets and, unconscious bias,
Right.
all from a pretty simple conversation about needing an extra hand.
Yeah. It's remarkable how much you can glean just from these sort of everyday conversations.
Totally.
The language that people use, I think, can really reveal a lot about, their underlying anxieties or
Yeah.
assumptions,
Mhm.
or even, power dynamics at play.
For sure. And so, in this dialogue, our main character, Tony, is feeling very swamped.
Yeah.
And he asks his boss for an assistant. And instead of just a straight yes or no,
Right.
we kind of get this glimpse into, I think, a really common workplace tension
Okay.
that a lot of people are probably familiar with,
Sure.
which is the need for support versus the reality of tight budgets.
Exactly. And, the boss's response, like, the timing just isn't right,
Yeah.
speaks volumes.
Totally.
It's not just a brush off, it's actually revealing a very cautious approach to risk,
Right.
which you see in a lot of workplaces, especially when economic conditions might be a little uncertain.
Oh, for sure. And
Yeah.
it's interesting how Tony describes his team as understaffed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a word we hear a lot.
We do.
But it instantly creates this image of everyone being, stretched thin,
It does, doesn't it?
you know?
It really appeals to a sense of urgency and even evokes a little bit of sympathy.
Yeah,
It's a clever way to frame his request,
totally.
highlighting the need without directly criticizing the boss's management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So smart.
Yeah.
So Tony doesn't give up easy, though.
Right.
He suggests an intern instead,
Okay.
someone who could take some of the weight off my shoulders.
Oh, I love that phrase.
So good.
It's such a powerful metaphor.
It is.
It really conveys that feeling of burden and relief.
For sure.
And it makes you wonder, how often do we all carry these burdens alone when we could be reaching out for help?
Oh my gosh, I know. I'm so guilty of that.
Right.
But this is where the dialogue takes kind of an interesting turn.
Okay.
So Tony says, give me a hand,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds very casual, right?
Right.
But to me, it hints at something a little bit deeper about maybe workplace culture.
I think so, too.
What do you think?
It's fascinating because on the surface, it does sound like such a simple request.
It does.
But that phrase, give me a hand,
Yeah.
implies a collaborative spirit.
Right.
Like this expectation that everyone's going to kind of pitch in and help each other out.
Uh-huh.
It suggests a very specific type of workplace,
Okay.
one where teamwork is valued.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about those workplaces where that kind of language wouldn't be used at all.
Totally.
Or it's more about individual achievement
Yeah.
and competition.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm curious, though, is every give me a hand situation truly collaborative?
Mm.
What about power dynamics?
Yeah.
Could it sometimes be used to subtly pressure someone
Oh, absolutely.
into doing something that maybe they don't really want to do?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think it really gets to the heart of how language can be used to navigate those power dynamics in the workplace.
Uh-huh.
Because on the surface, give me a hand sounds very much like a request among equals.
Right.
But depending on who's saying it and to whom,
Yeah.
it can definitely carry an implied expectation
Totally.
or even a veiled command.
Yeah. It seems so harmless, but the context really matters.
It does.
This dialogue is proving to be way more nuanced than I expected.
Yeah.
And even though Tony's boss seems open to the idea of an intern, he's still mindful of the budget.
Okay.
He emphasizes the need to keep our costs down,
Right.
reminding us that, businesses are always trying to balance their needs with financial realities.
Absolutely. That phrase, keep our costs down,
Yeah,
is a constant refrain in the business world.
it is.
It speaks to this constant pressure to be efficient,
Right.
especially, in those uncertain economic times.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that even seemingly simple decisions, like
Ah.
hiring an intern, are often weighed against the bottom line.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we have this back and forth between the need for support and the limitations of resources.
Yeah.
But the dialogue doesn't stop there.
Okay.
Buckle up, because here comes the twist.
Right.
Tony's boss agrees to find an intern.
Uh-huh.
Tony's thrilled naturally.
Of course.
But when he meets his new assistant, well, let's just say his expectations take an unexpected turn.
Interesting. So Tony's surprised when he meets Adam, his new intern, really highlights, I think, the assumptions that we
Yes.
often make about people in specific roles.
Huh.
I mean, Tony had clearly pictured a female assistant,
Right.
revealing just how ingrained those gender stereotypes can be
Oh,
in
yeah.
the workplace.
It makes you wonder how these unconscious biases impact hiring decisions and
Yeah.
career paths for everyone.
For sure.
It's a good reminder to examine our own assumptions, not just in the workplace,
Right.
but in all areas of life.
I agree.
And speaking of assumptions, let's talk about internships themselves.
Okay.
I think they sometimes get kind of a bad rap,
Do you do?
but I think they can be incredibly valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Internships offer a chance to gain real-world experience,
Yeah.
build new skills,
Wow.
and make those all-important connections in your chosen field.
For sure.
And even if some of those tasks seem menial,
Yeah.
like photocopying or making coffee,
Yeah.
those experiences all contribute to understanding how an office functions.
I totally agree. I think those seemingly small tasks actually teach you a lot about time management,
Yeah.
organization, and even professional etiquette,
Yeah.
which are essential skills no matter what career path you choose.
I agree.
And let's be real, not all internships are glamorous,
Yeah.
but they can be those stepping stones to bigger and better things.
Exactly. And a lot of internships actually lead to full-time positions,
Right.
offering a fantastic way to launch a career.
For sure.
Finding the right opportunity and making the most of it is key.
Yeah, this reminds me of my own experience as an intern. So I started in a temporary role, doing a lot of research and administrative tasks.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't exactly making executive decisions,
Right.
but I was so eager to learn, and I always tried to take initiative whenever I could.
And it's remarkable how, that proactive approach really transformed what was a temporary internship
Right.
into a permanent position.
Yeah.
It highlights how those early experiences, even the ones that seem less glamorous,
Right.
can actually lay the groundwork
For
for
that.
a really successful career.
Totally. And it's all about showing that initiative and that willingness to learn.
For sure.
Those qualities speak volumes,
They do.
no matter what position you hold.
Exactly.
And speaking of internships,
Yeah.
what are some things that listeners can do to kind of make the most of the experience?
That's a great question. I think when you're searching for an internship, look beyond those big name companies.
Huh.
Smaller organizations or startups can offer incredible hands-on experience
Yeah.
and mentorship opportunities.
Uh-huh.
And don't be afraid to reach out directly to people in your field.
Okay.
Even if they haven't formally advertised an internship,
Right.
networking can open so many unexpected doors.
Such good advice.
Yeah.
And once you've landed that internship,
Yeah.
remember to treat it like a real job.
Yes.
Show up on time, be prepared,
Right. Yeah.
and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Exactly. Initiative and a positive attitude can make all the difference.
Totally. And don't underestimate the power of observation.
Oh, that's huge.
Pay attention to how things work.
Yeah.
The company culture, how people interact.
Uh-huh.
I feel like you can absorb so much knowledge just by being present and engaged.
It's like this immersive learning experience.
It is. But what about those times when, an internship isn't all sunshine and roses?
Right.
What advice would you give to someone who's maybe facing a less than ideal internship experience?
Well, I think it's important to remember that not all internships are created equal.
Okay.
And if you find yourself in a situation where you're not really learning or feeling valued,
Right.
don't be afraid to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Have an open conversation with your supervisor,
Uh-huh.
expressing your desire for, maybe more challenging tasks
Right.
or opportunities to contribute.
That's such a good point. It's all about communication.
It is.
And sometimes it's even okay to walk away from an internship if it's truly not a good fit.
I agree.
It's better to invest your time and energy
Right.
in an environment that will really support your growth.
Absolutely. Knowing when to move on is a valuable skill in itself.
Totally.
And it really demonstrates a commitment to your own professional development.
Yeah.
Now, circling back to Tony and his new intern, Adam, their initial interaction really sparked this conversation about unconscious bias
Right.
and how often we make assumptions based on gender roles.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on how we can kind of combat these biases,
Yeah.
not just in the context of internships,
Right.
but in the workplace as a whole?
It's a crucial conversation to have, and I think awareness is the first step.
Okay.
We need to be mindful of the assumptions that we make about people
Right.
based on their gender, their background,
Mhm.
or any other factor that might influence our perceptions.
Sure.
And once we're aware of those biases,
Yeah.
we can start to challenge them.
Exactly. We need to move beyond simply recognizing our biases
Right.
and actually work to dismantle them.
Uh-huh.
And this can involve seeking out diverse perspectives,
Yeah.
challenging traditional gender roles,
Okay.
and advocating for more inclusive hiring practices.
Those are all great points. And it's not just about being politically correct or checking boxes.
Right.
It's about creating a truly inclusive workplace
Yeah.
that benefits everyone.
Exactly.
It brings in those fresh perspective. It fosters innovation.
Sure.
And creates this more dynamic and engaging work environment.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Diversity isn't just a feel-good buzzword.
Right.
It's essential for organizational success in today's world.
Totally.
When people feel seen and respected and valued for who they are, they're more likely to bring their full selves to work.
Yeah.
And that's when the magic happens.
You said it's about creating this culture of belonging
Yes.
where everyone feels empowered
Right.
to contribute their unique talents and perspectives.
For sure.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive
Okay.
into this surprisingly insightful dialogue.
It was.
It's amazing how this simple conversation about needing an extra hand
Right.
can spark such a rich discussion
It can.
about workplace dynamics,
Yeah.
unconscious bias,
Yeah.
and the importance of creating inclusive and supportive work environments. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the, key takeaways
Yeah.
for our listeners?
Sure. We've covered so much ground, from budgeting to unconscious bias to making the most of an internship.
I know it's a lot.
But I think one key takeaway has got to be the power of language.
Okay.
The words that we use, even those seemingly casual phrases like "give me a hand"
Right.
or "the timing just isn't right,"
Right.
they can actually reveal a lot about, workplace culture,
Yeah,
power dynamics, and even individual anxieties.
it's true. I'll never hear those phrases the same way again.
Me neither.
It's a good reminder to pay attention to the language we use ourselves
Yes.
as both managers and employees.
For sure.
Just being mindful of how our words might be perceived by others
Right.
is so important.
Absolutely clear and respectful communication
Yeah,
is the foundation of a healthy workplace.
for sure. And when it comes to those tricky situations
Right.
where maybe you need support or you're facing challenges,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to advocate for yourself.
Right.
Have those open conversations, express your needs, and be willing to negotiate.
I agree. It's all about finding that balance
Totally.
between being assertive and being respectful.
But what about those kind of larger issues like unconscious bias?
Okay.
What can listeners do to challenge those ingrained assumptions?
Yeah.
Not just in their own minds, but within their organizations as well.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because, it's not enough to simply be aware of our own biases.
Right.
We need to actively work to dismantle them. And that starts with creating a culture of openness
Okay.
and inclusivity,
Yeah.
where diverse perspectives are not only welcomed,
Right.
but actively sought out.
I love it's about moving beyond tokenism
Yes.
and creating a space where everyone feels like they truly belong and can contribute their own unique talents.
Exactly.
That sounds like a pretty amazing workplace to me.
It does, doesn't it? And it's something we should all be striving for.
For sure.
And not just for ethical reasons,
Yeah.
but because, diverse and inclusive workplaces are simply more innovative and successful.
So true. It's a win-win for everyone.
It is.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
We have.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up this deep dive?
I think just the next time you find yourself in a workplace conversation, just take a moment
Okay.
to really listen to the language being used.
Okay.
You know what assumptions are being made,
Yeah.
what anxieties are being expressed,
Yeah.
what power dynamics are at play.
Right.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
What a great point. It's like becoming a workplace detective.
It is.
Uncovering all these hidden meanings and motivations.
For sure.
And remember, creating a more equitable and supportive workplace really starts with each of us. It's about being mindful, having those courageous conversations, and advocating for ourselves and for others.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new
Thanks, everyone.
and are inspired to create positive change in your own workplaces.